Warning, this episode contains graphic language, depictions of murderous fathers, small town squabbles, misogyny classic, and as always, teen angst. Also, there will be spoilers for chapters 15 through 20 of Eldest, book 2 of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who also has 14 toes, exactly as Hilvog intended. The perfect amount of toes for my feet.
And I'm Jacqui Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast where we're also a bunch of villagers who are weirdly proficient at siege tactics. Just fuck around and find out, dear listener.
Come after us.
We dare you.
If you'd like to support us on Patreon, there's a link in our show notes. If you can't or just don't want to, we totally understand. And we just ask that you please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you think the day is coming where we're going to deeply regret asking people to review us?
Probably.
Just seems like a can of worms that I don't think I intended to open up, but here we are. No stopping the content train. So hop on and visit us at isthisjustfantasypod.com, on TikTok at Is This Just Fantasy Pod, and on Instagram or Twitter at Just Fantasy Pod.
Nice.
Thank you. I'm not usually the one who does the social plugs, and that shit's scary.
Yeah. Get on the content train. Choo-choo.
Content train. Before we get back to our two best bean farming boys, Dane, separated by space and possibly time,
I have no
I'm
idea.
not sure. I do want to do a quick recap of what we covered on the last episode.
Awesome.
We started by getting back to your favorite character, Baldor.
Yeah.
And I guess that guy Rorin's back too.
Yeah.
We kicked off back at Rorin's hideout in the Spine, where he gets a daily visit from one of Horst's boys to spill the tea about the havoc the soldiers and Razak are wreaking down in Carvajal. There's murder, dismemberment, consumption of human flesh, and arson.
It has everything.
Not my usual tourist activities in a new town, but I guess the Razak and I are different in that way, and only that way.
Just that one way.
Just that one way. So Albrecht finally brings Rorin back down the hill to join a clandestine rebel meeting where a small group decides to attack the soldiers in their camp. And once Rorin picks a hammer as his weapon of choice, they go full Village Team 6, cutting through soldiers left and right and chasing them out of their camp. But the victory high is very short-lived here because the rest of the town is understandably pissed, and the Razak come back with an improvised wagon bomb.
Oh, okay.
A bigger, deadlier fight ensues, but Rorin leads Carvajal to a narrow success, chasing the Razak off to find reinforcements for their revenge.
I love revenge.
This revenge on Rorin?
Oh, no, I hate that revenge.
I thought so. And from there, we smash cut back to Aragon's POV as the Elismira entourage is finally emerging into the sunlight from the depths of the mountain fortress. Kevin's really doing his best to flirt with Arya as they travel, and she's not having it. She's not about this life. Their caravan's honestly like a bit of a downer, but on the bright side, it isn't long before they make it to the above-ground dwarven city of Tarnak, and we get some incredible descriptions of the temple/fortress/city and the several new clans that call it home. The party is received by the local ruling clan's chief at the temple called Selbadil. That's the one. But not before Aragon's accosted in the street by As-Swelden Ruck Anhuin. They're a clan staunchly opposed to all riders, and to add insult to injury for them, Aragon is wearing the Dur Grimst Ingedum helm, signaling that the fact that he's been adopted by Hrothgar as a dwarf. So this clan is like, fuck this guy.
They don't like it.
They're not about it. So naturally, the drama queens over at As-Swelden Ruck Anhuin declare a formal blood feud with Aragon. But nothing can put a damper on a good dwarven feast, so they party it up that night with the who's who of Tarnak, the ones who aren't in an active blood feud anyway. The next day, Aragon gets a covert tour of the temple from the chief of the priest clan Ganel, and we get to ride along for a crash course in dwarven religion, your favorite, and history. The world building in this section was really top notch, and to seal the deal, Gannel gives a classic D&D magic item to Aragon. It's a sweet hammer necklace that will stop anyone from scrying Aragon or Saphira and alert him to any attempts to scry them. And because we can never just have nice things, Arya rolls up to rain all over this parade by provoking a fight with the priest in his temple about how all religion is trash. That's our girl.
Great.
And like, I don't disagree, maybe, Ari.
No.
But you have got to find some chill, girl, like somewhere soon, please, for us. But she doesn't have too much time to ruin everything because, as it turns out, Oz, Swelden, Rock, Onyuan, how many times can I say it?
You're crushing it.
Thank you so much. They're poised to start some shit in the city, and so our group needs to get packed and sneak out of Tarnak under the cover of darkness. Very creepy, very spooky. The party makes it down to the river without incident to continue on to Elismira, and that's where we're going to pick up this episode section.
What a great recap.
Thank you so much. I just do it for the accolades.
I feel like I was there last week.
That's so weird because you famously were not.
I know. It was really interesting, that episode where
I hate your clone. That guy sucks.
He's not very nice.
No, you're twin.
He's definitely the Arya of my group.
I get now why you hate twins, because you're twin.
My twin's not great.
No. How are you feeling headed into these chapters? What do you think is going to happen? Any predictions?
Well, I remember distinctly as a kid reading these and being like, these are range of emotions. Every time I was like, yes, then I'd be like, oh, yes. Oh, it was like a lot of like, it was an up and down feeling.
A roller coaster?
Yeah, it was a roller coaster.
12-year-old Dane had some trouble regulating his emotions about Aragon and Rollin.
Only 12-year-old Dane had that problem.
That makes
Adult
sense.
Dane. Yeah, he's fine.
He's even-keeled, that guy.
I am famously even keel guy.
Yeah, a lot of people say that about you.
I think it comes across in this podcast. No energy, no changes, not for me.
Well, kick us off on our chapter summaries. I'm excited to see what sent you into that tailspin, Dane.
We'll talk about, but hold on, what did you think about this week's read?
Love it.
Great.
Perfect. No notes. 10 out of 10.
Let's just do a misogyny classic in here, too.
Yeah.
Great. I'm speaking now. Moving on to chapter 15, Diamonds in the Night. The chapter starts with Rollin walking through Carver Hall after not sleeping for 24 hours. He knows he looks disturbed and troubled, but he's Garrow's son, so duh. He looks.
Also, those are kind of the same thing, but
right? They are. Anyway, my descriptive words aside, he looks around the town as he walks and sees the rest of the town looks the same.
Yeah, it's a bleak kind of go in Carver Hall right now.
They're not having the best spring or whatever it is. Carver Hall meeting is taking place and it's not going well.
What is?
Yeah, there are two sides. One wants to leave and one wants to fight. Mm-hmm. No one is very happy with each other. There's blame being thrown around a lot.
Yes.
And the thing that they can decide on is that Carver Hall gains nothing anymore from turning Rollin over after the Rozak gave them that really, shitty option of slaves or death and eaten.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not really would you rather that we wanted to get into over much, if I remember correctly.
I think it was something we decided to avoid. So it seems to make the most sense to protect Rollin and prepare for another attack as a group. Mm-hmm. Weapons or shields are being made by the local carpenter, and they want Rollin to take over for the defense of the town.
Gotcha.
Everyone wants the children and those that are vulnerable, like Elaine, who's pregnant, to be sent somewhere safe.
Right, yes. Elaine, famously pregnant to show the passage of time.
To show that time has passed. Well, Horst already had a beard, so they had to figure something else out.
It makes perfect sense. Otherwise, how will we know?
Exactly. They have a funeral for the 9.
Are there 9 or 10, do you think, people at this funeral? Because 9 died in the fight, right?
Right.
But then... do you think they brought Quimby's little niblets, like his bones?
Niblets? Quimby's niblets.
His little nibbled bones.
Okay, you're right. Let me start over. They have a funeral for 9 1/4 niblets of people that they lost in the conflict with the Rozak and the Empire soldiers. That I'm sorry, Quimby. And Rollin reflects at the funeral.
R.I.P. Quimby. Pour one out.
At the funeral, Rollin reflects that he's become a killer himself and he's the best at it in town.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to be the best at something.
If you're going to excel, like lean into it.
Yeah.
He gets a group of men to cut trees for the defenses. He ends up getting 48 men, and he thinks he only needs about 50 large trees. So
easy peasy.
Solid day for Carvajal workers. And then once they fell the trees, they will use their horses to move them into position. And it's actually crazy what they're going to do. They're going to take all the branches and turn them into sharp spears. And then they're literally taking like really difficult and like painful brambles and putting those on top of this death situation.
Yeah.
If that wasn't enough, Roran then goes to Bridget and next because he wants her to start organizing a ditch digging and spike filling on the other side. So once the soldiers climb over this bramble death trap, they'll fall into spikes or at the very least have to climb out of a ditch. Where did Roran learn this?
That's what I'm like, listen, I remember the first time I played D&D and like I came into it expecting to do some shit like this.
Yeah.
And still when we fought, I was just like, I don't know, should we run away?
Roran is good at this.
Yes, he's just like, we should definitely reinforce and dig a pit and put in some caltrops. And you're just like, what? How do you know what a caltrop is?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's very interesting.
So there's an important part here with Bridget. He wants her to organize the women and children because he can't manage everything. She is pretty brisk with him. Remember, she's Quimby's wife.
Right. She was.
Yes.
She's his widow now.
Yeah.
The widow of his niblets.
His little niblet wife. Oh my God. And she asks him why he's in charge, and Roran tells her because he knows, like, she basically goes, why are you asking me to be in charge?
Yes.
We don't get along. And he's like, because I know you're the only person who hates the Razak as much as me, and you're going to try to make this work. Because they're responsible for Quimby's niblets. The town is surprisingly good at all of this. They get way more trees than they need because Carvajal, hardy folk, do way more than the average man.
Very important, yeah.
Yeah, so they end up with a 5-foot wide ditch.
It's crazy.
Which is insane. Sloan the asshole is even in on it. He's like digging with a fury.
Yeah.
I'm picturing like the Mulan workout song and like the Rocky song playing in like different cuts.
Yeah.
Roran is exhausted but looking over at all the work, and I imagine like a Batman pose from the roof of the inn for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe like squatting down, the cape fluttering. I don't know.
God.
He's given a shield and spear, and so are all the other citizens, and the town of Carvajal is going to war.
It's time.
Yeah. Roran goes to take a rest for a bit and lays under the eaves of a house in grass, which I was like, go inside a house.
Yes, I felt like it was so weird.
Yeah, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, there's no reason for it. It's like, he's fine. He's not an outcast.
I don't look enough like Garo yet. I need to...
Maybe a couple nights sleeping exposed will do the trick.
It's so weird.
Just chap my face and give me some premature wrinkles.
Right?
Very strange choice.
But despite that, Katrina, girlfriend of the year, comes to visit him and leads him to a porch and asks him if he's okay.
And no.
Yeah, he breaks down saying every time he closes his eyes, you see the soldiers he's killed and their eyes right before they died.
That's bleak, dude.
Yep, he sobs in her arm and Katrina cries with him. And at that moment, when he's being comforted by his girlfriend, he knows if he asks her if she'll marry him. And it's like totally breaking custom. It might like be a huge issue with the town.
It's a bold choice, Roran.
But he doesn't care because they could die at any moment. And life is precious.
True love.
So this is actually both a really cool read and a really sad read. Roran is a total bro here, but he is inviting...
Is he a total bro? Asking a woman to marry you. Total bro move.
Well, I mean, he's being a bro to the people of Carvajal. You know what I mean?
Okay.
He's setting him up.
Okay.
I don't know. I think asking her to marry him like is an extra stress at a distressful time.
A bit. Yeah, I think so. Well, I bet he'll just like ask Sloan about it immediately, so everything gets like smoothed over pretty quickly. I think that's our kind of guy.
He's not like Aragon. You're right. He'll probably just do the right thing immediately.
Yes, he like knows what a smart choice would be.
Why do I still have like butterflies on my stuff? I already read it and I'm still like,
I don't know, Dane. What's he gonna do?
Well, I don't know. We should continue on with our next chapter.
Yes, in chapter 16, Under a Darkling Sky. As a newly engaged man, Roran has only two thoughts upon waking up the next day. One is, fuck yeah, I'm engaged. And the other one is, fuck me, the evil murder wizard emperor who wants me dead is probably going to want to kill my fiance.
Oh, shit. Didn't think that one through.
I forgot about that. Great, Roran. So he knows he needs to get Katrina out of town and into hiding, but he also has to convince Sloan of that plan first because, like, nobody knows yet that Roran has any, like, say over Katrina's life, essentially.
Yeah.
Also, Does Katrina have any say over Katrina's life?
I don't know.
TBD.
I don't know.
Tensions seem to be high everywhere in Carvajal right now because pretty much immediately after leaving the house that morning, Roran breaks up a fight between Albrecht and a whole group of villagers that could have turned into a blood feud. And it's just like blood feuds galore.
Yeah, it's so
in Carvajal, in fucking Selbadil.
I guess all over like the empire and the Alagasia at the large.
Yes, blood feuds in the zeitgeist of Alagasia right now. And speaking of blood feuds, Roran spends a good chunk of the day pointedly avoiding having a chat with Sloane about his happy news. As, you know, an ominous storm is brewing overhead. And I wonder if that means anything, Dave.
Is there any themes with this?
You know, actually, no. That's not what my themes are.
Never mind.
This symbolism was a little too on the nose, even for me to break down.
Sorry.
So just as the relentless storm breaks over the village, the soldiers in the Razak mount a new attack on these fresh fortifications. As the villagers stand to fight, Roran and Sloane, of all people, rush to defend a second breach in the wall. So the soldiers in Razak rush in once, and the villagers are fighting them at that point. And then they break in, they sneak attack basically another point in the wall, and just Roran and Sloane run over there to fight.
Oh, that's cool.
Sloane fights like an absolute maniac.
Doesn't he have a fest full of knives?
Yes,
and stuff?
dude.
Oh, so
yes,
wild.
he's an absolute savage. Roran's kind of scared. And the fight scene's really great all around too.
Yeah.
Roran catches the spear in midair and throws it back. Classic move.
That's like a superhero move.
Yes, all around incredible, all-time badass move.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Very into it. And after they actually manage to drive the soldiers away again, which is how many times is that now that they're just we don't care, we don't need you?
I mean, the soldiers themselves have to be getting a little bummed out.
I know. Well, yeah, that's probably it more than anything, is that the really, really shitty morale in the soldiers' camp is hampering. I think
Roger got killed by a pitchfork. It's
again.
Twice.
Yeah. Just a mess.
Yeah.
But after the villagers do drive the soldiers back again, Sloane goes on a very intense tirade. I think he must be his blood's hot because of battle. So he's just running around the town screaming.
Yeah.
And he goes on a tirade about how he would do anything imaginable to keep Katrina safe. And it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a Chekhov's butcher on our hands for a while.
Oh, like the cat one.
Yes, the one with the cat. And as the chapter closes out, Roran discovers that Delwyn, a man in town who died.
Delwyn? 10-year-old boy had been killed. I see.
I know. I think Delwyn had died, and now his 10-year-old son has been killed by an errant spear.
To be fair, there's a lot of people in this city, village.
Not that many.
And we can't know all of them.
Anyway, we know that Delwyn's son died in this second attack by the Razak and soldiers. Yes, don't be laughing, Dane. A boy is dead. And so as we close the chapter, Roran's agonizing about how to protect Katrina and how best to protect the children and vulnerable of Carvajal. What's next? Are we going to find out how they protect them?
No. We go right to chapter 17, down the rushing Mirwash.
Yeah. Is that about this? We get some resolution?
Nope. We're back with Aragon. Yeah, first I have to say, this is a strange chapter. Nothing very important happens, and I don't think, but we still somehow have a bunch to go over.
I was just gonna say, and yet
it's still long. Because they get a lot of world building here. So anyway, we're back to Aragon, as I said, and they're a day away from the last city that they just left, and Aragon is getting to know his Dwarven bros.
Yes. What was the last city they just left, Dane?
Selbadil.
That's correct.
Yes. Auric tells Aragon about Brom Watch 2023.
Like a somber
So
Brom
sad.
watch. Somber watch list.
Yeah, we find out more about him. Brom founded the Varden.
That's crazy.
I know.
I remember being oh shit, I thought he was just how did he have time to do that? Was he not busy mourning the death of his dragon, killing Morzan, stealing the egg?
The more we learn, the more
founded the Varden.
so important.
Crazy.
It's so crazy. He talked the dwarves into sheltering the Varden.
Yes.
Made the allies of the elves with the Varden. He like tied that all together. And just, classic old storyteller work.
Yeah. Any old storyteller could do it. I bet Tom Maryland could do it.
I bet Tom Maryland could do it. I miss Brom. Ulrich never really met him, as Brom was always hunting and fighting Forsaken. Forsworn, not Forsaken. My bad.
I really did not notice. I was like, what?
Wrong book. We learned a little about Ulrich too. His parents died of the pox.
Okay.
And Hrothgar adopted him afterwards as he had no children, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arya tells Aragon that his sword Zarok means misery in the ancient language.
Crazy.
Metal as
Very
hell.
intense.
Yeah. So I know Morzan is dead and was a super big dick, but did he have style?
Oh my God.
My blade is
Oh
misery.
my God.
I love it.
You would.
I do. Aragon thinks about throwing it away, which...
Please don't do that.
Don't do that.
Your magical, priceless sword, ever sharp blade.
One step forward, one step thrown away a rider blade. I don't know. One step back. I don't know.
Yes.
So Aragon hangs with Saphira for a little flight. They go, no saddle. Just he's feeling
barebacking it.
He mentions that he can feel his scars.
That's crazy that he still has like that much scar tissue.
That's so sad.
I mean, it was described as shredded thighs, which is typically only a thing I do to chickens. So
brings us back to that
gross.
first ride too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Well, while flying, they see 3 mini dragon things. They look more serpentine and their scales don't shine quite as much. And when Aragon reaches out with his mind, they attack him and Saphira by using these horrible mental and verbal shrieks while they attack with their claws.
Crazy.
It's wild. Bloodthirsty as ever, Saphira, she's insane.
I love her.
She says to Aragon, like, back off. I'm going to like kill these myself in an aerial battle.
Which I think we talked about when we covered, I mean, this was a long time ago now, but when we covered the battle with Durza, that's a classic villain move. Is like, leave it for me.
Yes,
Saphira just straight up is like, yeah, that's my bag.
She's like, I got this.
Yeah.
She uses fire and they basically just run away.
Yeah.
So it's kind of anticlimactic. But I thought they were a cool world building thing.
Yeah.
Like shrieking, flying serpentine creatures.
Yeah, it's definitely.
It's like in your mind too.
Yes.
It's wild.
It's like they're kind of like baby dragons, right?
Yeah, but they're like not intelligent, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not sentient.
Not sentient. Very cool.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. Ulrich explains when they land that those creatures are Fainker or wind vipers.
That's a badass name.
Pretty fucking dope. There's definitely an energy drink in Alagasia called Wind Viper.
Yes, and you mainline it.
Yes. A creature with animal-like intelligence that can't shoot fire like dragons, but uses mental attacks, like we said, to paralyze their prey.
Yeah.
Later that day, while sitting around the fire, Aragon notices a dwarf. Shrigningen. I don't know how you say his name.
I just like Aragon notices a dwarf. Yeah, there are several. He has a whole guard of them.
He's like, oh, there's other people around me.
That's so weird. But he's just been staring at Arya. He wouldn't know.
Yeah, this guy is literally metal though, because he has steel studs.
That's
on his
true.
necklace.
What's his name?
Shrigningen. I feel like I'm starting an engine.
Shurgnin. Or Shurgnine?
Yeah. We're about to get into an even more mouthful.
Great.
This dwarf informs him that the steel studs on his knuckles, implanted in his knuckles, are called Askulgamilin.
Amazing.
Askulgamilin.
I don't think that's how you say it.
I think that's how you say it.
I was really nervous for you.
Right in. So these dwarves are so insane. They drill into their finger joints after being put under by like wizard anesthesia.
Yeah.
And then magic users seal and embed metal sockets into the holes so that the dwarf, when they recover, can screw on like different studs into their like fists.
That's crazy.
And have like different size spikes. And it's crazy. So badass.
Yes.
I think the dwarves are my favorite. They're just all so cool.
Yeah.
Apparently it's very dangerous as hell to do too, because they can lose the use of their hands if it's done wrong.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it. Lots of little tendons in there.
Yeah, but it works well for dwarves because we learned that they have thicker bones than humans.
Yes, that makes sense though. I think with like the degree of hardiness we've seen out of Ulrich, like I think maybe you had some questions about that as it pertains to, a typical D&D depiction of dwarves. You're like, they're stronger, but Orc's like very strong.
He's way strong.
And maybe if they have these like dense, hardy bones, that's part of the reason why.
They're big boned.
They're big boned, yes. I'm familiar.
Yeah. Aragon thinks about his home and what the people of Carvajal are doing. Little does he know. He scries Rorin here. First thing, and for some reason it made me laugh, is Aragon thinks he must have left his miller job. Weird.
I did love this. It's like, oh, fucking Aragon. So the last time Aragon scried Rorin was like, he was alive and he was sitting in a chair, but since Aragon had neither seen the room he was in nor the chair he was sitting in, it was just Rorin floating in black space, like looking sad and like Garrow, which should be alarming for Aragon if Rorin looks like Garrow.
Yeah.
And he thought nothing of that. He was just like, dope, Rorin's alive.
Right.
You love to see it. And now...
Like weird.
Yes, now Rorin probably looks insane. I don't know though if this is exactly the same timeline.
It's so hard to tell. I don't know.
I kind of think so, but we don't necessarily have confirmation of that.
No.
But either way, like if it's the same timeline, Rorin looks insane. He's like battered and bloody and probably like crying half the time.
Well, and dirty. He's been sleeping under decks and stuff.
The only thing Aragon thinks is, weird, he left his job.
Yeah, weird, he's not milling.
I can't believe he quit his job.
That's my Rorin. Rutabaga Rorin.
Also, Aragon thought he'd just keep being a miller with his dad dead. I just have a lot of questions.
It is strange, his response. But then he just stops looking, goes to bed, doesn't think anything of it.
That's our guy.
Just watch a little longer, man. Like, anyway, once he falls asleep, he has nightmares and maybe some prophetic dreams.
It's weird because he didn't see anything weird during the day to have nightmares about.
I know. He sees birds in a stormy sky full of arrows flying on both sides of a battle. He sees a man on the ground with a dented helm and a bloody mail with his hand raised. An armored gauntlet points at the man, feeling like the power of fate. So what the heck is this a vision of?
I don't know. I'm having a really hard time parsing with what we have so far, whether or not Aragon's dreams are prophetic or just creepy.
Yeah, well, we do get some clarification on that. I don't remember this dream, but the dwarves start singing on the trip. I won't say much on that other than I'm not a big fan of like songs normally, but it's all right. Okay. But back to the dream.
That's not a banger, but like, you'd leave it on your like Spotify playlist.
Exactly. It was all right. You know, Aragon. Yeah. You could play it at like a wedding, but I wouldn't be bummed out by it.
You wouldn't turn off Alt Nation if they played this song.
Exactly. I'd suffer through it, you know? Aragon tells Arya of his vision, right? And she tells him she thinks he can see the future. A glimpse of the future.
That's crazy.
And she says, it happens sometimes. So, no big deal, Arya.
Yeah, we just did not know people could be predicting the future. I mean, the only person we had do this was Angela, and that was treated as something that was like standalone, the subject of an entire chapter. And crazy.
It's very strange. And as one would guess, Aragon instantly starts to think about time and what this might mean regarding fate and destiny and magic.
A bit.
And Arya tells him to not try divination magic, as the elves haven't really figured this out either, and it's dangerous to mess with.
Cool.
And then Aragon's like, oh, okay. And that's it. That's how this. And that's a weird chapter, right? Like, we got a lot of information, prophetic dreams, dwarven anatomy, weird dragon things, but not much happened. I don't know.
Not a lot of there, but yeah.
Yeah. So please tell me we get Rorin back and we can figure out what happened.
So chapter 18, drifting. Does Rorin seem like he's drifting right now, Dane, or does Aragon?
No, it's probably Aragon, huh?
So this chapter starts as our Huck Finn rafting party finally makes it out of the mountain river and out onto the rivers of the plains. The dwarves, I did like this a little bit, like notably the dwarves hate being in the open land, but Saphira is thrilled to finally have like a dragon's eye view essentially of everything for miles around. Yeah. She's very stoked.
She loves it.
Yes. So the first night that they camp on the plains, Aragon decides he needs to start his sword drills again, so he isn't in like such rough shape he embarrasses himself when he arrives in Elismira.
Got to do some squats.
Yeah,
Get in those gains.
And because he famously still has no fucking idea what is wrong with his back or how to fix it, he has another seizure immediately upon trying to practice. He's very emo about this.
Does he draw on the raft?
He doesn't draw on the raft, no. So we know he's not processing. He's not coping because he's not drawing his little pictures. I think I have a couple quotes here.
Okay.
He says, I am a broken vessel.
Oh, no.
And he also says, my own body has become the enemy.
You're nailing the Aragon voice.
Thank you so much. I'm trying really hard. But yeah, it's a bit much. She's really in a dark place. So Aragon's response to this is to just carry on going all out teen angst here. And Auric continues his win streak by realizing this and coming to talk to his boy Aragon. So that's nice.
Yeah, Auric's a bro.
Being the best.
Yeah.
After a pointed lesson on graceful leadership, Oregon. That's what they are now. Yeah. When they're together, they're Oregon. Yeah. Okay. I could dig it. But Auric gives Aragon a puzzle ring, like a metal ring that's kind of like a tinkering puzzle, essentially.
Oh, cool. I love those.
I actually do.
Yeah, me
I feel
too.
like you always get like fixated on the ones at my house.
Yeah, I love playing with them.
Yes, so he gives him one of those to basically stop him from just like ruminating over how sad he is about his back.
Here's a fidget spinner,
basically,
man.
yes. I also like reading this, I started wondering if like my boyfriend is running the same long con on me. Because so we have a bunch in our house, like I said, because people give them to him as gifts. He also allegedly likes them, but like I'm the one who's always obsessively like playing with them while we're doing stuff. So I kind of think he's just collecting them to stop me from,
it's a long con,
the internal racket in my head. And in that way, he's a very smart and understanding man.
Yes.
The next morning, anyway, back to our story. The next morning, Aragon wakes up and joins Saphira and Arya to watch the sunrise. We get a lot of like lurching insides and funny feelings that Aragon can't identify in this scene. But like, suffice it to say, Aragon decides over the course of the day, after he just shares this experience with his two girls,
oh my God,
that Arya understands him more deeply than anyone other than Saphira.
Really?
He has known her for 10 days.
Their interactions have proven to him this.
And standing silently beside her on a hilltop, Dane. I think both of them like put a hand on Saphira and they just all three like in a chain watch the sunrise. And I'm like,
definitely the cover of their music album.
Also, I'm not gonna lie, like 16-year-old Jacqui would have been like, he loves me.
Oh no.
We're soulmates.
Oh no.
I kind of could see it for a 16-year-old. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
Anyway, that night in camp, Auric explains how the dwarves craft their like ultra strong Urgelhorn bows. Aragon picks up one of the bows and is like, this is crazy. Like, what is this tree it's made out of? And Auric is like, tree, my guy. We make that out of the outward horns of a living being.
You know, that sentient other humanoid?
Yes, and Aragon's like, amazing, how?
I know, it's like,
I wish we had more.
I like Auric, but I was like, dude.
It's a little weird. The process, I'm not gonna lie, is kind of cool. Auric explains that like over the course of a decade, basically, they like carve and shape and like steam and bend the horns to like,
cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to think about how they got the horn. Maybe the horns just like fall off naturally, like a buck's antlers. That's the thing.
What are they, humanely raised horns? Oh, that's
free range.
Oh no, that's way worse. That's worse. Keep
grass
going.
fed, grass finished. Anyway, Aragon is genuinely amazed at this like tech. He didn't realize that the dwarves were like capable of this.
Okay, hold on. He went to their whole underground volcanic city and was like, "You guys could do this?"
Yes, he's not a smart man, Dane. Yeah, so he's amazed by this, shoots an arrow with it. It goes like a billion times further than anywhere. I liked this part a little bit because Auric's like, I better get my arrow back. And Aragon just like magics it back to himself. And they're like, I got it. So I did like that a little bit. Arya comes up to this conversation just while we're doing like weapons check. And they're like, hey, what's the deal with the elves and their bows? We're all talking bows. And Arya just says, we sing our bows from trees that do not grow, and walks away.
She's just a real fun person.
I know this really chaps your ass, Dane, but like, I can't help but just like picture her doing a different like goofy walk every time she does this. She just like says something weird and like sprints away with her arms waving over her head.
This is just dawning on me though. You know what she's like?
What?
She's like, have you ever gone to someone's house and you meet their like older brother and then they like say something weird like, well, we did that 2 years ago, and then just like walks away?
Yes.
That's what she's like.
Okay. I think I kind of had this thought while I was prepping stuff for one of our episodes coming up soon here, but I kind of had a similar thought that I'm like,
really?
Maybe she's just like really socially awkward. Could you imagine? Like nobody ever said she was cool.
Yeah. Maybe she's just like a weirdo.
A little bit, yeah.
Maybe she is perfect for Aragon. Maybe
That's
they're
what
both
I'm
like socially inept.
And she just like doesn't know what to do about it. She's just like kind of quiet, and everything she says goes over really strangely.
I'm gonna stop making fun of her. I think you've nailed it.
I think that's my canon, at least so far. I think that's why like my first thought is like, silly walks, I bet. She seems like a weirdo kind of.
She seems like a weird walking lady.
Yeah, which same. Arya, I kind of relate to that.
I could see that for you.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we close this chapter with, how many times have I said anyway in this chapter description?
It's okay. We're going to cut them all out.
Oh, the chapter's called Drifting.
There we go.
Drifting.
We've been drifting.
That makes sense. We close the chapter with the idyllic description of several days passing with nothing fucking happening. They continue traveling down the river. It's beautiful. Aragon flies on Saphira most of the time to avoid spending time with the love of his life, the weirdo Arya. Teen love.
It's a magical thing. Well, that takes us to chapter 19, Arya Svitkona.
I'm so glad you got this one named after your girl.
She's my girl. This chapter starts where they trade off rafts and eventually get donkeys and horses. They're not on the river anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Arya runs along the whole time. No problem.
It is crazy. She just runs alongside horses.
These elves are crazy. She has this endurance is nuts.
Yeah.
Aragon's internal monologue is a little anxious to me. He is shocked by the ancient forest. He's thinking about the elves, his new master, what he might learn, and just seems like he's taking in all the craziness. With this trip. Arya comes to him while he is laying down for the night and talks to him in his mind. I have to say, as a kid, I was like, is it happening? I was so off on this.
No, Dane.
My first read at like 12, I was like, is it happening?
My first read was like, he must be sleepy. What is she doing?
Yeah.
A growing boy needs his rest.
Oh my gosh.
Listen, I was young and pure.
You're very nice. He instantly is like, I hope she can't feel my awkward feelings towards her because she contacts him in his brain.
Yes.
And once she takes him out of camp secretly, she tells him that she needs to teach him some things before he gets to Elsmira. She says, and I'm quoting here, so that you do not shame yourself or me through your ignorance.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I get the elves are fancy and ancient, but if a people that are old and wise don't understand, like that 7 months ago, Aragon was an illiterate bean farmer in the backwaters of the Empire, and that maybe the ways of the very secret elves who let no one enter their realm is something he very obviously both could not and did not learn about.
Listen, they don't have time for him to not know this shit. Why not learn it on the road? Like, what's the problem
No,
here?
there's no. My only problem is the way she's framing it. Here's my thing with Arya: it's always framed in the worst possible way. All she could have said is, "Hey, I want to help you, like, impress the people that we're gonna see." Instead, she's like, I don't want you to like shame me.
I want you to embarrass me in front of my friends.
Maybe she is just so like now. I'm like, this makes sense.
Also, yeah, if her whole culture's weird, she's like, oh, we're gonna be so embarrassed, and I'm always embarrassed because I'm so weird.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can see it.
It's great. She's going to show him like some elf greetings and stuff here, but her reasoning always wild.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the point, like what we just talked about. Maybe that's the point. Anyway, Arya starts his lesson by saying that dwarves and humans are very similar and get along very well. Elves, though, are a bit different from dwarves and humans. Elves are special.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got that impression.
Arya pretty much like right away gets upset with Aragon and has to take a breath.
Hey, it's good for her to regulate her emotions, Dane.
She explains that elves are thus. Elves' long lives make courtesy the highest social virtue.
Yes.
When they can have grudges for hundreds of years, it makes every interaction very important so that doesn't happen. They use courtesy and ritual to keep things formal and make this far less likely to happen if you follow the rules, which means there's like a lot of social rules to prevent offending people.
Yes.
She also goes on to say that there are fewer elves than dwarfs and humans. And if their like crime rate were the same, they would be extinct.
Like if they weren't careful around each other, they all would just have done too much murder and be gone.
Exactly. So they cannot have wars. They can't have lots of murder. And instead, they have to follow the many rules. That's why they've made them, to prevent this.
Yeah.
So there are certain manners and greetings and rituals that he will have to know. So she points these out. And Aragon points out what I think we were all thinking, which is, doesn't this make it easier to offend people?
Yes, if you could do any one of 8 million things wrong every time you meet somebody, doesn't it make it more likely that person is going to want to fuck you up?
Yes.
Yes.
She says that it's better for him to be rude and capable rather than rude and incapable.
I'm not
She
mad
doesn't
about
miss.
that.
Like, she's just like, oh my God.
That is something a weird person would say. I'm just saying.
Yeah. And she basically said, like, elves love intrigue because of this. So, like, sure, that makes sense, but we've grown to love
I do
this.
like that. They're like, yeah, we like the Real Housewives of it all.
Yeah. Exactly. We love the drama.
If I've invited you to my daughter's christening and then you a week later failed to invite me to your lip gloss launch, we're going to have problems.
Exactly.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
elves.
The Real Housewives of Ellesmere is coming. Yeah.
I would watch the shit out of that.
Aragon, like, later asks about, well, Auric, as he also will be, like, staying with the elves once. They get there and Arya gets mad again, of course, and tells him that as a writer, it would be better if he looked more prepared than Auric, you dummy. And I mean, I guess, but isn't that at the expense of Auric and the diplomacy of the dwarfs and like the Varden?
Yes. Maybe she just is embarrassed that she got caught. She didn't think about it and she's weird, so she doesn't know how to react.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I want to like her. She's like in this book, but every choice she makes, I'm like, why this way of all the ways? So anyway, I'm not gonna go into all the customs, as they're kind of a lot, and it seems cool, but probably not really meaningful for the rest of the story. Basically, who speaks first and last, as well as the various greetings and sayings, changing these based on sex of the elf, as well as various hand gestures, all of that. Seems like you need to know.
Yes.
It seems like a lot, but Aragon tries, and luckily Saphira as a dragon doesn't really have to remember anything, so Saphira gets no homework.
I do love that. Yeah, she just gets a free pass. Arya's like, elves are going to be obsessed with you. You're like so pretty.
You're so pretty.
So don't worry about being good at anything. And I'm like, well, at least that's true to life. That feels like real life to me.
No, I don't want to hark anymore on Arya.
You don't?
Well, I don't, because like it's not fun. But
it seems like you were having fun.
well, then at the end of all of this, and I know I haven't been the biggest fan, but okay, at the end of this lesson, Arya is leaving, and Aragon, for the first time in these books, is like self-aware about someone else's emotions. So he stops her and he asks her very reasonably, like, hey, you've kind of been out of sorts. Is everything okay? You know, the type of question someone would ask a friend. Kindness. Arya gets so fucking pissed for some reason. Obviously, there's something up because, geez, man. So she says something, and I'm quoting here. She says, when we are in Duwelden Varden, I expect that you will not speak to me in such a familiar way unless you wish to cause affront. And then she just walks away.
You mean she sprints away with her arms waving over her head.
Right? So they can't even be kind and friendly to each other. And I mean, from a Raken class way, he's a freaking dragon rider. Like he of anybody should be able to be her equal and be friends, even from the get-go.
Well, I don't know if it's about equals or just about their like standoffish kind of prudish culture.
Yeah.
We have no answer right now, but I'm like, this feels so much of what she's doing, I guess, to me feels like a culture problem. Like she's reacting the way she knows like the people of Ellesmere are going to react.
I think you are right. It's
a tough look. I think you're right about that.
But I just think, like, shouldn't she be better at this because she spent 70 years outside of the elven lands?
She's never taken anyone back that we know of. Like, and it seems like they're very insular. It seems like this is not a big problem that they've had to deal with.
That's all fair. The worst part here, though, is that Saphira.
I think she's a weirdo.
Yeah, she's a weirdo. I think the worst part here, though, is that Saphira is on Arya's side.
Yeah.
Like, for no reason, and like pushes Aragon to go after her and apologize. And I was proud of Aragon at first because he's like, no, like, I'm not doing that. But Saphira's relentless, as we've talked about, and like bullies him.
Yeah.
He goes to apologize, and luckily, finally, I'll give it to her, Arya apologizes too.
Yeah.
Thank God. Thank Hellsvog.
Thank Hellsvog.
She then tells him she's just afraid. No context, no explanation.
Listen,
she just says this and then is off again.
Whoever said that she needs to be able to regulate her emotions and
give it a lot of passes to Arya, Jess.
Yeah, that's me. So the last chapter we have for this episode is chapter 20, Cerys. This chapter opens with an iconic piece of world building here. After several more days of riding, Aragon is approached by one of his dwarven companions who, after confirming that humans have 5 toes, delivers this absolute banger. Quote, "Nay, we have 7 on each foot. It is how Hellsvog made us. 5 is too few, and 6 is the wrong number, but 7 7 is just right.
Yes, the Goldilocks method.
Yes, I'm like, Christopher Paolini, why all the foot talk? Whatever. There's no way to know.
We should ask him about that if we ever get to talk to Christopher Paolini.
Yes, I'll be sure to do that. I had never really stopped to consider what the correct number of toes might be, but suddenly I'm very insecure for some reason. Do you think there's a right number of toes, Dane?
Yeah, it's 7, like I have on my feet.
Oh, right. Okay. I think you should have that looked at maybe, but maybe you have really like much better balance.
Like have
Isn't
it looked
that what your
at to like
pinky toe
model,
is for?
like let show more people.
Yes. If we can get 50
no,
reviews
no.
was the Guy Fieri threshold.
Yeah.
If we can get 75 reviews, we're putting Dane on Wiki Feet. As dusk falls that night, the party finally makes it to Duweldenbarden and the first elven outpost of Ceres. Arya vouches for their entrance into the city with the elves who are standing guard there, and she's like joyously greeted by the first elves we've met aside from her.
Yeah.
And Eragon has the realization when we see these elves that elves as a whole are capable of laughter. And I'm just like, get yourself a girl that's fun, dude.
Yeah.
If you didn't know she could laugh, you've never heard her laugh.
It's not a good look for Arya.
I mean, she was brutally tortured, I guess, also.
That's
like,
true. He is. I will
2
say
weeks
this
ago.
Like, well, and
3
for a
weeks ago,
while
sorry.
ago, it's been like because didn't they travel a month at least before they got to the Hatterack Desert?
No,
Right?
Dane.
No, it was right
It
after.
should have been probably a month with how far they went.
Oh yeah,
That
He went
whole
a million
thing
miles.
took like 5 days.
That's true.
So she got out of prison,
3
torture
weeks
prison.
ago. Yeah, that's fair.
They took like 5 days. They were at the Varden. Within like a week battle under Farthen Door. Within like 3 days, they were
Yeah.
out on the road here.
and now it's been like what, 2 weeks, a week?
I think maybe like a week
Yeah.
would be. I mean, the way these distances work, the way the travel works.
Yeah, I have no idea.
They've gone 1 million miles and it's been 4 days.
Well, the barge wasn't actually just in the water. The barge was on Snowfire that was running on the water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, it has not been that long since she was in torture jail. So
Which
maybe
makes-
that's why she's not very chipper.
Okay, maybe that actually
Maybe
makes
she like literally has PTSD.
Well, that's less fun.
Womp.
To make fun of her about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm wrong.
But she's never laughed before, so
Eesh.
I don't know. For your first relationship as a 16-year-old, I'm going to stick by my guns on that one and like just get yourself a girl that's like fun, lighthearted.
Wait, you don't think
Eragon,
the awkward 70-year-old other species
suffering from PTSD.
suffering from PTSD, like superhuman person's the way to go?
I don't know. I would not recommend that, I think, to any child that I knew. So the elves lead their guests to their huts, which like are built into and surround this massive oak tree. The setting already is very cool.
Very cool.
Eragon and Saphira both are a little starstruck, I think, to be in the elves' homeland, which is kind of fun to see. Saphira notes that the elves have more magic in them than anyone else she's ever met. This is something she can like sense innately.
Yeah.
And she says that they feel, quote, not of earth or stone, but like she thinks ethereal somehow is basically how she describes
Yeah,
it.
because Guntera made them. Come on, we know this.
Yes, exactly. Aragon, meanwhile, pulls like a super. They're like having this whole discussion, just the two of them, and he basically is just like, "I'm just happy to be here.
I'm happy to be invited.
He literally is just like, I just think it's cool. I haven't thought much about it." Yeah.
Oh, look, tree hut. Look at that.
Yes, that's our guy.
Yeah.
After one of the new elves sings literally the most beautiful song Aragon's ever heard over dinner that night, the dwarves ask, the dwarven like guard asks if this is where their journey ends. Arya, of course, makes this uncomfortable by saying they cannot come any further and they will be heading back to the mountains the next morning.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, okay, well, maybe we should have like set out some expectations at the beginning of the journey. Nope, none of that. Just
Or a simple thank you would have been nice. Thanks for protecting us.
nah. They weren't protecting her. They were protecting Eragon. She doesn't
By
need
proxy.
protecting.
Oh my gosh.
They all head to bed, and Eragon eavesdrops on Arya and the elves talking about Islan Zadi, who apparently has been grieving in some way since Arya's disappearance with the egg, which I found kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
And then one of the elves is like, quiet, these I think they're talking about the dwarves.
Yeah.
They're like, the short ones may be hardy, but their ears are keen or something like that. It's like they may be dense, but their ears are keen. And
These
you're like,
dumbasses might hear us.
Like, what? Yeah. Are you calling them like bulky or stupid or both?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
These fat, dumb people might, it's like, come on, man.
That's not even Arya. That's just one of the other elves.
It's just like the elves for me are just like, the dwarves just seem nice. They like, want to get drunk and count toes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Also on the subject of the toes, I think I failed to mention right after that, Aragon's like, I think I was just the subject of a bet. Like the guy came up to ask him about the toe thing and then like rode back to the other dwarves.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
And they exchanged money after Aragon answered that humans have 5 toes, which I thought was hilarious.
So the bet was like, they do have more toes or they don't, right?
It was like, there's no way they have 5 toes. That's disgusting.
Yeah,
That's way too few toes.
Weird. They need more niblets than that.
They need gross. Yes, that's correct. Also, I think it was Shurgdain that came to ask Aragon about the toe thing. So in the morning, all the Dwarven Guard, minus Auric notably, is staying on. The rest of the Dwarven Guard departs with a final warning about the concealed volatility of elves.
Warning!
Yes, exactly. I'm sure that's how they did it.
Yes.
You're, I think, part dwarf. Unfortunately, you are very tall, but other than that, the tall dwarf. They also are going to take Snowfire with them for safekeeping, which is nice.
And can you imagine Snowfire was like,
yes, much like Caddock, I think, the grandpa horse, when he finally got sold, he was like, thank God, I don't want to be around any more Urgles.
I don't want to be around Aragon.
Everything's scary. Yeah, the dwarves are like, we'll take Snowfire, we'll keep him with the Varden.
Right.
When we all meet up for war at some later date, we'll bring your war horse. You're welcome.
When we war, we'll catch up.
Yeah. The chapter and this episode sections closes with the now considerably lighter Ellesmere entourage continuing their journey in canoes up the Edda River and across Eldor Lake.
Eldor Lake.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Our last scene in this episode is one of our new elven companions. So we have 2 new elves to replace like 12 dwarves. One of our new elven companions hilariously solves Aragon's puzzle ring in like 1 second.
I rolled so hard here.
I would be pissed. I would be so mad. That's also the problem with all the like metal puzzles I have around my house.
Yeah.
My boyfriend solves them in like a second. Like, you're a troll. I've been working on this for weeks. And then every time I get one, I just like shake it in his face. I'm like, look at what I did.
I did it.
Yeah. I really think this is a long con of his.
Yeah.
So that's where we wrap this episode's section of chapters. And I want to cover a couple of things in our analysis section for today.
It's time for analysis.
First, I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
I had a really hard time picking out one like unifying theme for this section.
Yeah.
Our 2 plot lines are feeling more different by the minute. But after going back over what both Aragon and Rollin and our side characters, never forget our side characters, what they're all learning in these chapters, I think a lot of it connects back to the idea of respect. I want to start with Rollin. I think this has clearly been like building in his plot line to me, but I love the way Christopher Paolini is writing the villagers like growing respect for Rollin, essentially. We most often see it through Rorin's internal monologue. We've talked a lot about that device and how well it frames his character, but it's posed in his internal monologue as his kind of confusion over the fact that he's being like deferred to. They almost seem afraid of him. And he's like, I'm just regular old Rollin. Rutabaga Rollin, as you would call him.
I'm Rutabaga Rollin.
Yes. And in like a backwoods, rely on your neighbor kind of place like Carvajal, the respect you're able to earn from your peers means everything. So I think this is a really big step for Rollin. It really shows what kind of place he's earning in the community.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, is kind of telling why it's such a big deal in the town that Rollin clearly doesn't respect Sloane enough to talk to him about Katrina.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's such a tough look for him. And thinking about this situation this way, like, I think I actually had a little bit of a realization when I was like going through and trying to make notes to get the analysis done. Part of the deal in a small village like this, I think, where everybody needs to be reliant on their comrades, can almost be framed as like the baseline or the floor of respect that they have for one another and for life in general is very high.
Yes.
Like that's the kind of society they live in, which makes them both very giving and caring for the people they consider their in-group, part of their village, and highly distrustful and threatened by those they consider to be outsiders.
Yes.
And we see this dynamic play out, I think, all over the place, not just with Rorin and the Carvajal villagers right now, but also with Aragon in both the last book and this one.
Yeah.
Maybe Aragon was like too young when he left Carvajal to have that like bone deep distrust hammered in as much as his cousin does. But I can totally think of a few places where we saw it play out in the early towns and like cities in this book. Like when he was coming across people, watching Brom interact with the people in those first couple towns, he was just like, everybody seems bad. Everybody seems kind of mean. What is the deal here?
Why don't they like us? Why are they being so like stay away?
Yes, yeah. So I think that's kind of the distrust of it that Aragon carried through that we got to see play out in the last book. And then I think the respect for life side of it came up in a huge way for Aragon too, both during and in the aftermath of the battle at Farthendur. Obviously, it's a huge feature of the disagreement he got in with Murtagh at the end of the book Aragon, where they disagree about killing that slaver.
Yes.
Like respect for life seems to be a recurring thing here. And I think it might be interesting to keep an eye on this like respect situation as it pertains to people from Carvajal moving forward, just because of that like small town dynamic.
Should we call it the like Torkenbrand dilemma or something?
Yes. And speaking of Aragon, I think we can connect this theme of respect to his storyline here in a lot of ways too, in this particular section, not spanning the whole narrative so far. First, I think his ongoing seizures in a way are jeopardizing Aragon's self-respect by making him kind of afraid of his own body. Christopher Paolini's writing and language are both very melodramatic when he's writing these scenes, and like when we get to see Aragon's internal monologue around this issue. And I think that's really to hammer home how much of his identity has become wrapped up in his physical prowess here.
Yes.
I also think like the political undercurrents we're seeing in Aragon's storyline, even though they're a little lighter in this section than we might prefer. But like the seemingly tenuous balance between the dwarves and the elves, I think that can kind of be framed as walking a knife's edge between respect and disrespect. So these cultures are coming together out of necessity, but it's very unclear. I mean, the dwarves have all said some shit about the elves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They do not get the impression they really don't like them.
But they're all kind of acting with at least some level of mutual respect to get this job done, I think, is kind of what we're seeing here. And I think most obviously in Aragon's plotline, at least, Arya's lessons and the elves' customs and their culture because of that revolves around politeness, I think can really be boiled down to showing respect, essentially. It's been made very clear that it's going to be of the utmost importance for Aragon to learn the respect of the elves and earn the respect of the elves, and it seems like he's going to need to show the proper respect to earn their respect back, if that makes sense. So it's definitely like a goes both ways here. And I'm kind of curious as I was getting to the end of this, like if the way Arya rubs you wrong can kind of come down to the idea that we like on screen haven't necessarily seen her earn the respect that like she's assuming she commands in all these situations, and that other characters defer to her, like she's commanding this level of respect, and like it hasn't been demonstrated to us maybe on screen why.
That's totally it. Because like Brom is a all-knowing, important person, but there were moments of him being kind and even like apologetic to Aragon. Yes,
and moments of him like really demonstrating why he knows what he knows and that he's very competent and capable.
Yeah, and so it came out differently when he did it because like he was respectful of Aragon. You know what I mean? It wasn't one-sided, I think that's totally it. You've nailed it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess for me, like Christopher Paolini does write a lot about like what a badass she's supposed to have been.
Yeah.
We don't see any of that though, but for me, I'm like, it's much less painful to read her like abrasive manner if you just kind of take that stuff as the truth, you know? I think for me it's like an easier read, and I like her character a lot more if I'm just like, okay, this is what Christopher Paolini said she's like, and I'll just trust him. She's to be respected because she's kind of a baller.
Yeah. She is cool so far.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Yeah, she's done some cool shit. So that's what I have for a theme this time, but I would like to use, I generally like to use the analysis section, not just for themes, hopefully. Maybe I'll add in some more of this stuff. It's been here and there sprinkled, but like tropes, symbolism, historical connections, that kind of stuff. So I did have one of those things pop up a little bit, I think, in this section. I definitely feel like this section gets a little tropey with all the travel chapters here.
Yeah.
I know maybe you're going to get into this a little more in What Are the Haters Saying? Because it's a tough point in this section. But I thought it was worth digging into just for a minute here as well, just as like a broader literary trope. Mostly just to make the point that like travel chapters, I think, are so prevalent. They're prevalent enough in fantasy literature that we have this shorthand to refer to them. We're travel chapters. That was trash. That was like a bad part of the book.
Especially in like the sword and sorcery subgenre of fantasy, it's like the mainstay. You go to one mission, one exciting thing.
Yes, exactly. So I think a lot of fans understand these chapters generally follow a pattern. We almost always have these like flowery descriptions of the landscape and scenery. For me, a lot of that stuff's very engaging. Sometimes we'll get some world building or character development if we're lucky, and always we're getting from point A to point B. That's travel chapters in a nutshell. I know I use this a lot in defense when we talk about this stuff sometimes, but like truly an entire book of Wheel of Time was nothing but travel chapters. That's basically fair. Yeah. And not even necessarily in a way that like gave us anything except for getting from place to place. It was a big world. We were going day by day in Robert Jordan's world, and like we were just traveling across the plains, getting chased by hounds for a while. Yeah. And that's not a knock. I loved that series. I just think it's worth saying that like widely beloved and celebrated fantasy content tends to incorporate this trope. And Christopher Paolini gets a lot of shit for it, I think.
Yeah, I will say you're right. I think Robert Jordan gets a lot of shit for those early books too, but I think this is way more. Like it's outsized for Paolini. It's not that like think so. No one's complaining about Matt in those early books in those travel chapters, but they're not complaining as loud or as unified and consistently about Christopher Paolini's travel chapters. Yes. And it's just like, okay, like I get it. This is part of it.
Yeah, and for me it's like, okay, can this trope be used very effectively to move the plot along or like do a lot of world building in some cases? Sure. Right. Is that the norm? No. I don't think so, at least.
Well, I think it's hard to do is really the problem.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like for me, the few sections of this book and the last book a little bit do enough to develop, especially in this book, our understanding of the cultures in Allegasia. Like we've learned so much more about the dwarves and the elves here. Yes. And like just the landscape in general. For me, it ranks like mid to high in the assessment of travel chapters writ large. And I think too, in the first book, especially, we got a lot of the training montage stuff during the travel chapter. So I think that was used pretty effectively because we love a training montage.
I love it. I think what the problem was is that the travel chapters have been a very deep part of this book so far.
Yes, in like a relatively small, expansive book so far. It's mostly for Aragon's plotline been traveling. Right. Yeah, I could totally see that.
And on that deep note.
Oh, right. I was like, we're still talking about it?
Let's head over to the deep dive.
Okay.
Deep dive.
I think a fun deep dive this week, as we have lots of elf stuff coming up, and for sure we'll have elf stuff going on next week, is to talk about elves within fantasy for a bit here. So I haven't read The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, or The Silmarillion in quite a while, but I know there are pretty huge parts of the Tolkien world, and since he brought what we most often recognize as elves in fantasy into popular culture, I thought a brief overview of them from the Tolkien perspective would be a good start.
Yes. I believe in you.
So before I do this, I know I'm opening myself up to a lot of scrutiny, so please don't at me. Like, if I get something wrong, which I'm likely to do, like, send me it to let me know. We'll try to put we'll put a caption on the video that says where it's wrong. But I think this is mostly right. So
we're afraid of the Tolkien diehards, if you can't tell. But
we love you, but we're scared. We're scared of you.
It's out of respect that we fear you.
Yes. So here we go. From what I remember, the elves and humans were created by the same god in that story, but the elves were first and were walking the world of Tolkien before even the sun and moon were in the sky. They invented culture and language and were immortal unless killed. They were hunted by a lesser god or evil dude, however you want to break that down in the Tolkien sphere, because he hated them for some reason and eventually disfigured and transformed some of the elves to make orcs. Somewhere in there, I think, before the sun came out, they ventured from Middle-earth to a place across the sea, and a long time later, the elves that came back to Middle-earth were better because they saw some trees and are known from then on out is like the high elves. I don't know the direct details, but that's general gist.
Sometimes you see a tree and it changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I just look, a single tear drops down. As we are already see, just from this brief history, the elves in Tolkien's universe, Jax, there are like 15. There are 15 names for them, by the way.
Oh, God.
They're similar to what we already have in Christopher Paolini's world, where they're like come from across the ocean from another land, right? Yeah. So back to Tolkien's elves for a sec. They are very pretty, with little other than their like privates separating women and men. They are fast, a little faster, a little stronger, have a little bit more endurance, are very nimble, see better, hear better than humans. They also don't leave tracks in the woods, can walk on piled snow without sinking into it, and don't sleep, but go into a meditative state.
Right.
Yeah, basically the Tolkien elves are immortal, pretty, and more elegant humans.
Yes.
I would say that they are less physically powerful than what we've seen in Christopher Paolini's elves.
Yeah.
We've kind of seemed like a superhuman, like, right?
Yes.
But I would say they are very similar. One thing to note here is that the elves in the Tolkien world were pretty okay with humans for the most part of their history, for most of their history, from what I got the vibe from.
Yeah.
And really worked well with them. And they also weren't inherently magical. So they could craft cool stuff, and they had a few powerful wizards, but it just wasn't something that they all did. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So we're talking just like improved, pretty, immortal humans is kind of the Lord of the Rings vibe.
Okay.
If we move over to the elves in TTRPGs like Dungeons and Dragons and the one I'm more familiar with, Pathfinder, in D&D, the elves come from the blood of their main god, Carillion Larithion. Shout out to Xylosiant the elf. And they are the good elves and literally the offspring of their god. And I won't go into the drow right now, but the good elves are basically able to go anywhere and travel over the plains. They settle throughout the different types of geography and adapt to them pretty easily. And eventually they settle down and slowly become mortal and go to the Feywild. This is really in the weeds. But from there, they head to the prime material plane and settle down. Okay. Basically turning into humanoids with pointed ears and beauty. Pathfinder has a bit more of a Tolkien-ish origin. They originally come through portals from another world. Okay. But they too, like the Dungeons and Dragons one, are mostly like humans with some small differences. Okay. Neither of those groups are immortal.
I never really realized that. That's kind of new information to me.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Yeah. And they're just they're long-lived, so similar in origin, kind of. Yeah. And seems like most elves are travelers who seek somewhere to find a good home. So they all so far look the same. They all have very pretty much like elf ears. They're all pretty, Lord of the Rings type stuff. And I would say the difference in the game seems to be their abilities, but I would say that's only because it's a game. Like in their actual stats, they get like boost to their decks. They're more nimble, you know, that type of thing. So we'll move on. So next we probably have the most famous elf in fantasy literature, which is Drizzt Do'Urden from the R.A. Salvador books. There isn't much to say here that we haven't already covered. He gets an honorable mention just because he is probably the most famous like elf in fantasy outside of, you know, the Lord of the Rings ones and Aragon. So he has pointed ear, lives a long life as well, is a bit faster, a bit stronger. We're seeing a theme here, you know, which leads me to elves in like mythology, like real world mythology.
Kind of where maybe even Tolkien
got. For sure where Tolkien took some of this stuff. They find their real world origin in Norse and Celtic mythology. They weren't really main characters in those mythologies. If I understand correctly, they were more players in the background. So sometimes they were seen as like minor fertility gods, as they were often connected with the larger fertility gods like Freya in North like mythology, for instance. Gotcha. And they had like magical qualities about them. Basically, they were wild and beautiful, and it seems to me supposed to be completely alien in thinking to human beings. Yes. And in most cases, neutral towards them.
Almost like more analogous to like Wiccans. Like kind of inhuman, like nature, wild.
Yeah. Anything you can attribute to like that like otherworldliness, you're definitely nailing it in some aspect. They were seen as magic and wild, as we talked about. They were also dark elves in like Norse mythology, and they were hostile to men. From a more Celtic perspective, though, they were seen as more tricksy and stealthy, much smaller.
I like that.
Yeah.
Like sprites almost.
Yeah, like think like fairies and leprechauns kind of. We get the like, that's where you get the like stealing children and stuff. All of that stuff starts to come out of that.
And this is where, and they're like, these mythological traditions are using the word elf.
Yes, they are using elves.
These creatures.
They're called elves, yeah.
Where do or maybe you're getting to it. I am sorry to interrupt you. Where do
That's
the
okay.
Keebler elves fit in? Where are we?
Yes. Oh, the
where
mythology
are we
of the
living
Keebler
in
elves.
trees and making cookies? I like cookies.
Well, my cookie lore is not as strong as my D&D lore.
Well, maybe we'll come back with an update on the deep dive when we get to Keebler.
Yeah, Keebler elves, a deep dive coming your way. You stay tuned.
And Santa's elves. We'll be sure to
I'll add those in. So what do we have with a very quick and unacademic breakdown, which is what I just gave? We get a lot of commonalities for a general elf, right? We get a generic elf will probably have pointed ears, beautiful bodies, graceful athletes, quicker than normal human reflexes and senses, probably long-lived. They most likely have immigrated from another plane or world or land and have since made a beautiful home, right, in the wilderness. Furthermore, they're probably tricky creatures with a love for the forest and cultural materials such as music, poetry, and other arts. And finally, they turn to war. When they turn to war, they're not to be messed with.
Yes.
Because when you've made me mad.
They're
is
super
scary.
soldiers and they're formidable and volatile.
Exactly.
Yes.
So far, Christopher Paolini's elves are much like all of these descriptions, if Arya has anything to go off of.
Yes.
And I am interested in seeing where he breaks the mold here with his elf divergence. The biggest way now seems to be with the degree of the strength enhancements and prevalence of magic.
Yeah.
But there might be more already. Again, we only have Arya, and I wonder if Christopher Paolini's elves are going to be more antagonistic than some of the other elves we've had.
Well, they probably don't all have PTSD, so maybe the rest of them will be. Well, the two we have now seem nicer, although they still talk some shit about the dwarves.
We also have another one. It seems the queen's response to the Varden might have been pretty vindictive, so I'm interested in seeing that as well.
Yes.
And I don't hate the elves right now.
No.
But that does take us to hate.
Interesting.
Which is, what are the haters saying?
Actually, you should do your research, Have you even read that book? You pronounce it.
What are the haters saying?
There is an index in the back, right?
This is a totally derivative.
Copycat.
So for this week's What Are the Haters Saying, I have to ask Jax, do you know what they say about this section of the book? Could you guess?
Well, yes, because I talked about it a little bit. One of those things that yes, I definitely noticed on a read through. I think maybe not just, but primarily through the exercise this time of having to unify it all in a theme. I'm like, what is actually happening?
Yes.
And I think a lot of haters ask that question too.
Right.
I found an answer.
Right.
where they found hate.
Yes.
Soul, bone deep, crushing hatred.
Yes. And haters, we love you. We're trying to turn your hate into love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's us.
So I will say this. Basically, nothing happens to further the plot with Aragon here.
Sure.
He has a fit.
Yes.
He learns about some Dwarven and Elven customs and beliefs.
That's him.
He has a fit.
That's him.
and
he loves to do that.
Yeah. Meets some new creatures.
Uh-huh.
Not in that order, but this is basically it for this set of chapters. In comparison, Roran's chapter furthers his story much more. It seems more important to read.
Yes.
You could not remove Roran's chapters and still know what was going on, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
The haters would argue the same isn't true about Aragon's chapters. If you took these chapters out, and you just skipped forward to when he met those elves,
yes,
I almost think nothing other than the world building would be lost.
Yes, that's fair.
Yeah.
I can understand that. I can see that. Yes, if you just took it out, his plot's not going anywhere. I guess I would argue that moving along a storyline is not the entire point of writing.
I agree.
And I think we're just in such different places in these narratives. With Roran, it's almost like we've started over again with Aragon, back in Carvajal. You know what I mean? With the Razak attacking, there's so many parallels to the beginning of Aragon's storyline that Roran's now facing. I think that's a very pointed and smart decision in a lot of ways because we're able to draw that really direct comparison to their actions and their choices under similar circumstances. But
it grounds us in the Empire in a way that we cannot be any more grounded in the Empire with Aragon.
Yes, exactly.
And this is really a war that's Empire specific. So it's really important that we feel that.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
And I would say too, on top of that, there's a lot of Aragon's chapters and world building that I think maybe Christopher Paolini is going for the same feeling to ground him in the wider world with all these cultures that Roran maybe is never going to meet because nobody in Carvajal had ever met an elf or a dwarf before. So I think maybe it's an important part to ground both of them in their storylines at this early point in this second book. I think it makes sense.
As always, I don't agree with the haters here, but that's what they're saying. These chapters with Aragon in this section are slow, and although full of world-building moments, there are tons of things I would rather learn about, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, where's the political, where's the politics and war strategizing of the past sections?
Yeah.
Where are the training sections and practice with the Dwarven elite and the amazing Arya? If none of those things, why not build an actual conflict between Arya and Aragon that doesn't make Arya seem like the worst? Make her more vibrant, more full.
Yeah.
Or maybe even give Saphira a POV here. I think this would have been a wonderful time for Saphira POV. Like looking at Aragon, like dealing with Arya and the dwarfs.
Yes, if the humanoids aren't doing anything particularly interesting, maybe the interesting choice is to look at them in a way that's alien for the first time.
Yeah.
I could see that. That'd be kind of fun.
Like we also there's a lot to do there too. There's dwarfs. Saphira's gonna run into elves. Maybe she thinks the dwarfs look tasty. There was that dwarven war with the dragons. Like that would be interesting, and we'd actually tell something I think that the haters would find very compelling.
Yes, that would be kind of their fixes.
Yeah. So I love this section for the world building, but again, I think this is not a crazy criticism. This is the slowest part of this entire series we've read so far. So it's not a critique that I think honestly is really that crazy. I just think, it's all right.
I guess for the amount of people it seems like are saying it, and with the vehemence they're saying it, it seems a little overrated to me. And I guess I would just return back to like kind of what I said as far as it being a trope and like compared to what?
Compared to what?
And for me, again, like even having the world building here feels like an improvement over some travel chapters. So I'm like at least mid-tier.
Yeah.
Bare minimum for me, it's a mid-tier travel chapter section, and I'm happy with that.
Well, it seems like the only difference here is like there's no combat.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's what the bother.
No training, no combat.
Which I'm actually like, it's refreshing that there's not like sword play here.
Well, and the way Arya is written, I don't know if I could deal with them fighting anymore. So
right. So how'd you feel? We're done with our like what the haters say. We're at the end of the show.
Yes.
How'd you feel about this segment? Like, how'd you feel?
I liked it. I mean, it was definitely one of those times where so much was happening over in Rorin's plot line. It feels like a little bit of a hard pivot to go back over to Aragon, to me, I think in this section, it reads almost like humor. And I'm not sure if it's something Christopher Paolini did intentionally, where like Rorin's like murdering people straight up and like
struggling with like the visions of those he've killed eyes,
like having funerals, and we truly just cut to Aragon like leaning back, relaxing on a river raft, and you're just like, what?
Yeah,
These
seriously.
two guys could not be more different right now. I think that is the point.
Just like a margarita in his hand and like a boombox with like Uncle Cracker singing like, "Give me the beat, boys, a free mouse." Yeah, it's totally.
That's a little bit about how Dane and I spent family vacations at the river, circa 20 years ago.
Oh my god.
Uncle Cracker, wow.
That's
Our
a
references
throwback.
are topical.
Oh, very, very throwbacky.
Also, have we missed an episode of the season yet where you haven't sang?
No, I think you know who's really enjoying it?
I think you're a perfect 4 for 4 so far.
Our definite was in the music industry, like music producer.
Our actual music producer, Kevin, is really enjoying this.
He's
singing
loving
into
all
the
my
mics.
singing. Yeah, he loves it when I sing.
I think I do. That's Kevin on the ones and twos over there playing the laugh track.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I watch him die a little bit inside every time
Each
it
time.
happens.
Sometimes a single tear, just like
I don't
Aragon.
think you need to be mean to him like that, Dane. I don't know what he ever did to you.
I love you, Kevin.
Do you have any final thoughts on the section before we wrap up, head out?
I would just say this. I've always been drawn to the dwarfs, and I've been thinking about why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unlike the elves, they're not written like they're the most powerful beings in the world. So like, there's none of that to really think about. And the things we see, some of them, like the religion, we know some of it's goofy. Like a coral is not a rock, so it can't grow.
Yeah.
So like, there are these mistakes about them, and this like culture, it almost makes them more vibrant here. And I think the reason I like them is they feel more real, and they feel interesting and funny and nice. You know what I mean?
They feel positive in a way that the elves maybe struggle a little bit under like the weight of the expectation Christopher Paolini had to write like a super soldier, like beautiful, graceful.
You kind of write yourself into a corner.
A little bit, yeah.
They have to be perfect. So then you have to explain all of the things in a way that is perfect. And
yes.
we might be coming back to this. We'll see.
Well, as people who definitely are not perfect, we appreciate a little nuance, I think. I think we could definitely agree about that.
And on that note, I think with a perfect show recorded, we would like to... Kevin just rolled his eyes so hard. Thank you for listening. Please make sure to rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, support on Patreon, and check out our social media at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok or at Just Fantasy Pod on Insta and Twitter. And if you have any questions or just want to write to us about me messing up Tolkien, we would love to hear from you. And you can email us at isjustfantasypod@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you would like to keep pace and read along with us, for the next episode, we're going to be covering Chapter 21, Wounds of the Past, through Chapter 27, Queen Islanzadi. Do you think you know where we're going to be in the next episode, Dave?
I think we're going to stay.
Do you have a guess?
Just two nerds and we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.